Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Dobbs Ferry Planning Board for October 8th, 2015. We have 8 items on the agenda tonight. I'd like to say up front that item 4 has been struck from the agenda. It will be discussed when we talk about zoning changes on item 5. And item 6 has been struck. It was the village attorney has informed the board previously that we have moved from the moratorium idea to having a suggesting changes in the downtown design guidelines. So those items 4 and 6 will not be discussed tonight. Item 1 is the adoption of the minutes of the planning board meeting of September 10. Does anyone have any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I would move that we adopt the minutes of our meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Second? You
Second. I'm seconding.
All in favor? Aye. Mr. Brosnan seconding. Thank you. Item number 2 is a continuation of the public hearing for site plan review of the Board of Trustees for proposed alterations and additions to property located at 75 Main Street, which we all know in the village as the Oceana Building. Welcome to the team from that project. We look forward to your presentation this evening.
Good evening, I'm Arpad Baksha. I'm the architect for the project. I'm going to quickly walk you through the site itself and then talk about the particulars of the proposal. So this is looking diagonally north of the building, this main building. Directly opposite the building. Corner of Chestnut and Main Street, looking down Chestnut.
The audience can't see.
You know what, maybe move on the other side.
Maybe somebody in the back
The
could
mic can come out of
hit the lights
stand.
Yeah,
too.
okay.
Thank you.
Is that good? Did I step on something?
Really?
Oh, man.
Be ready for the as soon as we get the right cord.
Okay. Okay, this is opposite the building on Chestnut Street. I just want to pause here a minute. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me without the mic?
You need the mic.
You should do it to the mic so that.
You have to, for recording,
Just pull it out.
it just pulls out.
I got it. Okay. 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 I think we got it. I hope.
Don't look at.
There it is. Okay. This is the Oceana Building right here, and this is a later addition. What's important with this image is that the Oceana Building and this addition are coplanar. They're on the same plane. Also, what's also important is that pieces of the existing building are continued in the addition, which is part of our design. Okay. This is at the corner of Chestnut, and Palisades. To get scale for this, from the top of this building down to this point is 21 feet. Okay, so I'm roughly, if I stand up, I'm 5'10", so it's about 4.5 of me tall. Looking down Palisades towards the train station. Okay, opposite on the corner of the addition, you see a piece of the Oceana here. On the other end, collectively with the adjacent building next to it, the residential building next to it. Okay. Opposite the residential building here. Down Palisades, away from the train station, so north of the train station. Okay, we were graciously provided this image of the old building, and part of my professional practice is, a major portion of my professional practice is restoration work. We've been very successful at it, and we're doing it for 32 years. And so based on this image, it helps, it underscores a lot of things that we've been thinking about in the past. So let's go. Some of the inspiration for it was a historic building in a World Heritage Site. Same thing, different building. Again, old building, masonry, heavy masonry building, arched windows, transom, simple treatment of it. Open it up. Again, simple treatment, masonry building. This example we were looking at because later on, when we talk about the back part of the building, which is over here, I'm pointing to the black image over here, where the addition is, that's where the existing addition is. That's where we're going to put a garage, so we wanted to light those windows. This is how they're lit. This is LEDs pointing up, keeping it,
Excuse me.
keeping the light within.
Excuse me, I think we went through this last month, and it's interesting, and I appreciate Mrs. Spikes giving us the images of the building in its original form, which is different than what we see today in terms of detail. And I think, you know, from my eye, much of what you're talking about is more reflective of that. However, I think that's basically an issue for the Architecture Review Board.
Okay.
And I think we can move past this and move on to the massing of the building, which is really our interest here.
Okay. So, this could tell. No, it's good. It's all good. Okay. This is the existing, how the building looks presently. And what we are proposing is a glass division between it's to slice a piece of the back part of the building here, roughly at the end of the rolling doors, garage doors, installing a glass transition piece between the existing historic building and the new proposed building. And then adding a 3-story addition with a rooftop gym and pool. Okay. So we've been listening to all the comments as time has been going on. Our original scheme, let's go back. No, the back. Okay. So our original scheme was set back 10 foot from the street and a square block, rectangular block, sorry. Okay, the next scheme we went back, when we saw on September 19th, we brought this to that walkthrough within that we had at the site itself, at which point we had set back the corners an additional 10 feet on the 3rd and the 4th floor. Since then, we heard all the comments again at the meeting. We've reduced the massing again This time, we stepped it back. Michael, next image, please. And we come on, English. It's tough. We stepped it back in two directions. One is towards Main Street, and the other direction towards the north. So, keep going. Okay, here you can see it. This was the original, very straight. This moves back, and this moves back a lot more. For instance, from this point to the face here of this building is 30 feet, and it's an additional 10 feet to the property line. So the top part here moves back 40 feet. View from the corner, showing step back. We also step back the other corner away from the house again, so it goes steps back and cut again and cut again. So it's cut back in a pyramidal shape. Okay, so here you can see the original one, which is single plane. Here we step back with the balconies, cut them out, still maintain the roofscape as a cornice, but that has now been removed, as you can see here, and we've stepped back again. I think this is a very telling picture. So this is 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet. And that's the roof addition, rooftop mezzanine addition with the pool. Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, again, this is the evolution of it from the first image to September 19th image to today, what we're proposing. And here you see the step back in elevation from the opposite side, going back, and on this side, stepping back. Also, as I said earlier, it also steps back towards Main Street. So it steps back in two directions, creating a pyramidal shape. People asked me why we kept the trees out last time. And the idea was that so we don't obscure the architecture. So you see the building itself, so what it is, because out of roughly 5-6 months out of the year, you don't have leaves. So we don't want, we're not trying to be slick here. We're trying to show you what it's really going to look like. But when there are trees, it's going to look like this. Just so you note, there's trees here that go up to the 3rd floor. I mean, they're huge, huge trees between the house and our proposed addition. Again, straight on, the evolution of it, and here step back, and then here our final step back. So it is substantially smaller. Another view, you can see how it steps back. From the front it steps back, from the side it steps back. From diagonally across the street with trees. Okay. Again, the evolution from the side, down the road. You can see how it steps back with the trees. So just to put in perspective, the existing facade of the addition to the Oceana, that's the existing part here, is at the same plane as the house. Our first terrace steps back 10 feet from there and eventually steps back 20 feet. So here and then up to here again. I'm misspeaking. no, it's 10, 10, 10, 10, 40 feet, sorry. That's it. That's it. That's how we changed the project since you last saw it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
is there a drawing that shows the streetscape continuing to show the church?
We have a model which shows adjacent buildings, which is going to take about 2 minutes to load. Just by this. Yeah, here. Thank you. Thanks, Patty. We'll show you in a model. It's you can spin a model and look at it. Do you have anyone else while we're doing this?
Is it still the same number of units with all these setbacks?
We're thinking right now 23 units.
Is that what we've,
We started at 32, and now we're down to 23.
Yeah, correct.
And there are 32 parking spaces?
33 parking spaces.
does that change your configuration of the parking places?
No, because the parking all happens in the existing addition here,
Right.
and it will be on 2 levels, one entrance here, one, and for the lower level, along here, along Palisades, and the upper level along Chestnut Street.
And it may have been in the papers, and I apologize, but does that change the way you meet the requirements for both the residential space and the retail space? I would think.
Retail has no parking requirement. Residential is one space per unit.
I think retail does the parking requirement, doesn't it?
I thought retail had no. Sure.
Patty Steinschneider, involved in this. The parking requirement in the code makes specific arrangements for age of use of building. So an existing building that is older than a certain period has to make certain requirements. A building that's older than 50 years, in this case, doesn't have to make any provisions for parking. This building has always been commercial use, so the fact that we're keeping some of it as retail doesn't necessitate adding parking for it. It actually says it clear in the code. We would have to add, I think it's 25% to the existing retail space before we would have to provide any additional parking. And the additional parking would only be for the additional percent, area of the building, nothing for what's there now.
I have no idea what you just said, but anyway.
I mean, doesn't this constitute a change of, you're switching to residential, so, I mean, when you make a change of use to the building, so I'd like to see that section of the code.
The answer is yes. The model's up. I'm a private one.
Well, I'm encouraged that you have responded to comments that we heard at our last meeting and have tried to make this building, hard as that is, to conform more to the environment of Palisades Street, which is basically impossible to do. But it's just a question of, are we at a point that it makes sense in that respect?
Yes.
Sure.
What's the distance, I'm sorry, of the entry to the lower garage off of the corner? And is there a requirement?
From here to here?
Yeah. Well, for the first curb cut, isn't there a provision in the code about how far it's supposed to be till you get to the first driveway?
This is 80 feet, it's 10. This is roughly from here to the corner is about 35 feet.
Anybody else? Al, anybody have any questions on our submission at this point?
I mean, it's,
I just have a question about the parking decks. You're not counting either one of those levels as a story, correct?
It's correct. I was not part of that meeting. I think Patty or actually Bart should speak now, because he's gonna speak anyway, so I think it's a good introduction to Bart Platt, the owner.
Bart Platt, I'm the developer. I guess really the issue we should be really focused on now is the mass. And I hear everybody's thoughts and concerns on this, and really, we've been trying really hard to make a win-win situation here, and we've been hearing from everybody. But I think we have to really determine whether it's an MDR2 modified, a DT, or a DB. And that's really what this meeting should be about, because without that, there's no direction where we're going. So we need your help on that and defining.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's what I said in the last meeting is,
So
I'm
since
very
that,
excited about the project of restoring the Oceana building. I mean, I have a very skillful architect, but it is a 6-story building in an MDR2 zone.
but
So-
the MDR, you asked us to, that last meeting, to have a meeting with Darius and Brian to determine whether the MDR the 2-story parking garage, whether it was considered 1-story or no story. And Brian, I haven't seen any response to that, but I did speak to Brian on Monday, and he commented that the 2-story parking garage does not count as 1 story. And therefore, based on that, you can build 3 stories above that.
I think Darius has to make the call on that. It's in the code.
Is that Darius's call or Brian's call?
It's only Brian's
Brian's
called my,
Is it?
my
Okay.
input.
Okay, so let's get that out right now with them, so we can clarify that. Brian, you wanna comment on that?
And the definition in the code says story first. It says the lowest story or the ground story of any building, excluding a basement that is not counted as a story, a cellar, or up to 2 levels of structured parking located below another use.
It's some bizarre language.
That's what it says.
Okay.
I'm making the interpretation that the 2 stories of parking do not count as additional stories to the height of the building based on our particular Village of Dobbs Ferry code.
Thank you, Brian.
Such bad thinking.
Based on that, you can put 3 stories on that 2-story structure. As far as the highest mezzanine level.
Excuse me, people, please,
It,
please,
the
you'll have
highest
your
level, which
opportunity.
is the pool and the mezzanine, as long as you're within 1/3 of the square footage of this floor below, it doesn't count as a floor, so therefore, we're in compliance with that. As far as if you wanna have, here, if you go with the MDR2, I don't see how this models out for anybody. So I think it has to be an MDR2 modified, which means we have to address the site coverage, which is 27% as per the code. We have the existing structure at 73%, so we need a modification on that as well as the height. And we try to take into account pushing it back, taking 2 units off, prime real estate, and, I don't see anything else we can do here to try to, make it work.
Well, and that's always the quandary that the board is in, I think, in the village in general, is, knowing, we can't know and don't have the ability to ask you about the economics of something to know, what point something does not pencil out in terms of being doable from your point of view. So I think we have to figure out what we think makes sense for the village and then go on that basis.
No, but, I don't see, I try to understand what the alternates are, and I don't see it. If you keep that same structure there, you have to go on top of it. If you don't keep the structure there, then you have a parking issue on the front structure. So if you wanna get this project done, you have to make a decision, and it's gotta be done, like, there's no reason why it can't be done now.
Yeah, thank you.
I hate to say it like that.
So the,
It's not brain surgery.
sorry.
You know, it's really-
maybe I'm missing something there. Given what we just heard, and that there are 3 stories, so how is the pool gym level being counted?
It's not being counted because it doesn't, it's, Patty can vent in on this, I think if the calculation is of the pool area and the mezzanine area is less than 1/3 of this floor below, it doesn't count as a story. Is that correct?
But I always understood a mezzanine as being
The same
below
volume, yes.
a floor above. I mean, I've never heard of a mezzanine on top of a building.
Yeah, well, we have to define on this because there's a little bit of confusion. A mezzanine in the state code, which we have to comply with along with everything else, is a certain percentage of the floor below and it need not open into that floor. So that's the definition of mezzanine. The Village of Dobbs Ferry doesn't have any special wording about mezzanine, but it does refer to being able to have space in an attic. So obviously, if this board felt it made sense, which I'm hoping it doesn't think would make sense, you could add a roof on this, and you'd be able to enclose the exercise area. The pool, I don't think anybody's gonna say is a story. Pool on your roof, is not habitable space, it's not a story. The mezzanine area could be put under the pitched roof, which would increase the height of this, but permissible under our code. Right now, we're allowed to go 40 feet to the midpoint of a pitched roof from the average plane on the street, and that would basically, if you're going here, you'd be able to have a roof ridge that's right above this parapet. So you'd be able to, right basically up into what this is, because the 40 feet, which is the midpoint of the roof, hits just about at the top of these windows. So you could have a more massive building and you'd comply with that question.
And
Yeah,
where
but
you?
again, it's all a moot point if the zoning isn't figured out.
Of course. So how do we go forward? I mean,
So, sorry, the measuring is being taken off of independently on this lot, correct?
We've done it a bunch of ways, we did submit this,
I
we'll
have that
submit
here.
it for you next time. Basically, if you take the grade plane between A and B is one option, or between A and C is the village's option, you get points that you're measuring from. If you measure from this grade plane to 40 feet, you're coming up to these windows.
You might explain what you're saying.
I can't.
No, I mean, in words even.
Okay. But you're not gonna be able to see it, I don't think.
Well, that's, I mean,
Basically, here's your existing building. You've got a slope site. The Village of Dobbs Ferry says that you measure the height of a building from the average grade plane, which is taking the high point and the low point, and then you're measuring up to the midpoint of a pitched roof, 40 feet in the MDR2 zoning district, which is what the zoning is. That gives us, we should get those little walking ones. That gives us the height at the bottom of the windows on the 3rd floor of the building to the midpoint of a roof. Now, we've gone through this kind of dance on other projects, and I don't think anybody was happy at the end of it when they started trying to find that way around stuff. If we start adding mass to this, making a roof, we can probably make it work where there is not that question, but I think it's a dumb way to go. I think you've got a really good design, it's provided by an excellent architect, and I think this is an anomaly of a building. If you say you wanna have parking for the front building, you need to have the 2-story parking garage. If you say you wanna renovate the front building, you need to have revenue. If you want to have this happen, you're going to need to find that way of balancing between a lot of different concerns, not the least of which are the ones that are identified in the vision plan.
So I think the other question that I had suggested was if this lot is taken as MDR, basically built as of right. So let's suppose we build 2 stories of parking, right, you demolish this structure, start over, 27% coverage, 2 stories of parking, and 3 stories above it. What is your total square footage?
Your total square footage at 20, well, here, you're permitted a total coverage of 2,965 square feet.
And what do you have?
compared to?
Right now, the MDR zoning envelope is 5,641, and the site coverage that we have, I forget the exact, well, actually, I can find it right here. The existing building is it was somewhere around, I can't find it here. It's basically 73% of the MDR site, which, MDR2 site, which is 11,000 something feet. So it's like 8,000 something.
Could you say those numbers all again? What would,
I can't find the numbers on here, it's not very much light, and I'm very old. No, I need my glasses. Okay. The existing, what we've got out is that the existing lot area is 11,000 square feet, and we have 73% site coverage, so figure it's just about 8,000 square feet.
per floor?
No, that's the whole point, that's the existing warehouse. We have stepped in from that, so the massing that we've got is significantly less than that. We can do a whole analysis on a floor by floor basis, but one of the things I'm trying to see us avoid doing on this one is what we've done in others, where we have month after month, because I know that won't work in this project, where we keep fishing with things and saying, well, what about this, what about that? I think this is incredibly clear what you have to deal with. You have to decide, do you want it to be an MDR2 with no waivers, at which point forget renovating the building, forget the parking for the front building, or do you want to do an MDR2 with modifications, which makes this work without problem, or do you want to consider a DT has been recommended by some people in the village, do you want to go to a DB, which has been recommended by others? We put in a request for a change of zone, we went to the Board of Trustees and they referred it to you. So that's something that you guys need to make a decision on. It's not a decision made by you, it's one that you refer to them. But I think you need to be thinking about that and focus on whether you want to see this. This was an iconic building described in the vision plan very clearly as being the key to the downtown. When John Shapiro walked through the village the first time in getting ready to do this whole visioning thing, he said, why hasn't somebody renovated that building? And I know 3 people who have tried to do it, including the current owner. It's not easy to do. It necessitates a certain return to make it work. And that means a certain number of units. I'll be very candid. I'm shocked at the number that he's at. Because when I modeled this, I was looking at 32. I thought maybe you could get down to 28. How he's getting down to 23 units, 24 units, I think it's kind of amazing. If you look at what that is, I mean, and one other thing, just really quick on this. We're not getting anything more than what's permitted. In fact, the MDR2 zoning district permits 14 units on the MDR2 site. So you're allowed 14 units there. We're talking of maybe as few as 10 now?
No, there's 10.
Yeah. So 10 units where we're permitted 14. So we need consideration to have more units. What we need is there's maybe something, if you guys ever get done with the review that you're doing already on the things, you might want to take a look at MDR2, because if you look at all the other zoning districts in the village, there's a lot of information about it, very little on MDR2. MDR2 has the same percentage of site coverage as MDR1, although the density goes from 2,500 square foot a unit to 800 square foot a unit. That doesn't really make sense. So we're working with the 800 square foot, which is the code, and that comes out with 14 units, and we're proposing perhaps as few as 10.
With this, how big are the units?
If we're going 10 units, the top 2 will probably be larger, it'll probably be close to 2,000 square feet. But right now, all the other units that we've got are in the 1,300 square feet in the new building. In the existing building, they are as small as 650 square feet, pretty much up to maybe 1,100, 1,200 square feet until you get to the penthouse units. And then those would be maybe 1,600 square feet.
Thank you. George and Dwight, are there other things that we ought to be bringing to the attention of the applicant now before we open it up to the public hearing?
I think sometimes it's good to step away from the zoning issues and look at what we've said all along is the key issue for this, is that it's visual impact from Palisades, from other points of view in the village. And I think the applicant is on the right track in stepping the building? Is it enough? Is that gonna make an interesting building? Is it the proper addition to the other building? A lot of that goes to the Architectural and Historic Review Board. But I think I would say that the visual impact analysis is the key, first. And second, saving, and getting the older building at 75 Main Oceana back into, bringing it back to life, not having it sit like it is. It's a vulnerable building when it's not being used, and not being used carefully. So I think it's extremely important that somehow we work out an arrangement where that building is renovated. And I think we have to listen to the objections we're gonna hear shortly, I guess, from residents there. And we also have to look at ways in which the design is working to reduce visual impacts, to make it more acceptable, and realize that we may not get the ideal solution. The other thing, if you walk out to that area now, the back of Oceana building is no beauty, and the existing warehouse building is extremely unattractive. So I think, would be working toward making sure what we got at the end of the day is an improvement over what you see now, I think. And then I think we've got to look, the zoning this has to be addressed. I'm just saying, if we look at visual impact analysis as the key on this, I think that's the best direction for us.
Thank you. George, I know you've submitted information to the applicant.
Yeah, we gave the applicant our technical comments, but one item Javier mentioned was the site distance coming out of the, I think you were referring to it earlier for the driveway.
Right.
They'll have to look at that as part of the review of the project, but I don't think being that close to the corner, that would be an issue, because there's plenty of site distance in both directions.
Yeah.
But other than that, most of the comments that we have are technical, our usual technical comments regarding utilities and so forth. And since this site doesn't have a lot of green space already, and they're not taking away anything or modifying it, the drainage and everything is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much.
If I can, just quick. In addition to the parking, we've only talked about the inside parking. One other thing we need to take into account is we're gonna lose a parking space to create that curb cut for that, but we're gaining at least 2 additional parking spaces on the street. So this will not cut any spaces. In fact, you should get at least 1, if not 2 additional spaces
On Chestnut?
on Chestnut, because you've got curb cuts there now, which will be eliminated.
Eliminate. Good. Thank you. Other comments from the board at this point? Otherwise, I would. Good. Like, this is a public hearing, and if anyone wishes to address the board, this would be the time to do it.
I'm Steve Tilley at 22 Elm Street and Ogden Park. And I just wanted to, I believe that there are actually a number of variances, and in addition to the area coverage variance that are required. I mean, and I want to go back and just more in general, that we did have this discussion very clearly when we went through the zoning process in the land use committee, at the scale of what was going to be happening, and therefore the future of this site was bifurcated. It was Palisade Street scale on Palisade Street, and Oceana, the Main Street anomaly on Main Street. And that's a fact of life, I think, that the developer has to live with, the owner has to live with. The sale price has to be predicated on that very clearly defined zoning that he knows about going into this situation. And the sale price will reflect the ultimate value of what's built, but it doesn't affect the ultimate viability. I think Dwight's being too dour about the prospects for this building on Main Street with all that square footage beyond normal zoning bulk. It just is a question of the land price, the sale price. If one does not reverse history, which is not really recommended by the National Park Service, by the Department of Interior, or the State Preservation Office, and go back to that wonderful granary view, you have to, there's a tax credit rehabilitation that would provide 20% financing for substantial rehab of the building on Main Street. So that financing, I think, makes the economics look much better. And I think there is also a development footprint, since there's an existing footprint of the warehouse, which is excessive, but I think there's a close to 27% development footprint at the scale of Palisade Street, which is basically 1.5, 2-story townhouses on top of the warehouse. That would work. It would reduce the income from the sale of the property to the current owner, but it would be a viable extension of the development. It could be parked without a non-downtown design code guideline entrance right across from the front entrance to Pompeii, within 75 feet of the corner, which is, again, that's a recommendation of the downtown design guidelines, that you keep those kind of parking entrances further away from an intersection. That intersection is already a kind of dangerous one. I negotiated at least twice a day on foot, as I did tonight, or in a car. And there's a lot of whizzing along that intersection. And there's also, obviously, on Sundays and other kinds of holidays, a lot of cars on in front of the Pompeii Church. And as we've heard in a previous hearing at the Board of Trustees, a lot of concern about issues of parking and traffic on Palisade Street in general. But just to remind everybody, the MDR2 zoning is 27% coverage. And again, I think that a new development could, it's not completely hamstrung. In other words, there's some dispensation. I believe that, in fact, you have the ability to refer this application to the zoning board for an interpretation. With all due respect, I happen to disagree with Brian's interpretation. Certainly wasn't the intent to allow parking structures to escape the height requirement and the scale that we were looking for throughout the village. So I think that should be referred to the ZBA for an interpretation at the very least, if not a variance. And you have the ability as the planning board to do that directly. It doesn't have to be done through the building official. So again, minimum front yard of 20 feet, minimum rear yard of 25 feet, and side yards of 10 feet, and combined side yards of 20. So I think, given all the area anomalies, I think that there's enough of those that needs also a referral to the ZBA, because that escapes your power to grant waivers from the strict application of the zoning board. Those kinds of variances need to be submitted to the 5 tests under state village law, that variances from the existing code have to be tested against by the ZBA when there is a ZBA.
I'm out of my competence, but the fact that there's an existing structure on the building that is non-complying.
That's a pre-existing non-conforming building. You can, again, if you're doing an addition to a pre-existing non-conforming building, you can do a conforming addition. And my belief is that there is a conforming addition. That's fine. The warehouse is fine. It can be renovated. You can get access, you can put parking in. It doesn't create a non-compliance. So this is again, the test of self-creation. This is their building out of compliance above it, it's, this is a very routine issue in construction and zoning, that if the pre-existing non-conforming is there, that's fine. It's kosher. But it's your new construction that you're proposing that has to meet the test of the current, what was carefully thought about and approved through a fairly long process as the desired outcome in a zone and on a property. A couple of other minor things. So the true restoration, I think the SHPO review of the front building would mitigate against the return or the opening up of large glass areas. It would, again, to succeed in getting a tax credit, you'd keep the neo-colonial arch divided like.
Why would that be more appropriate than the original view with the larger windows?
Because that's, you're having to spend energy to go back from something that's already historic, something that you're reversing history. You're determining that one piece of history is more important than another, so that the Park Service applies the Secretary's standards for rehabilitation, which mitigate against reconstruction going back in time, so that you would lose your tax credits if you did that. Since it's perfectly viable as it is.
It's not a fair question, I really shouldn't go here, but
Yeah.
if this is also obvious and appropriate, why has this building sat here for the last 25 years deteriorating with nobody taking advantage of these obvious opportunities?
I'm sorry, but it hasn't sat here for 25 years deteriorating. When David Cohen owned it, we put a $300,000 lead-coated copper roof on it, which secured it. It's for a variety of reasons, which we shouldn't go into in a public forum. The property has not been, since David Cohen turned it over, it hasn't been properly husbanded. It hasn't been properly, proper kind of stewardship hasn't been maintained, and the kinds of returns that could have accrued during that period haven't accrued. And in fact, some destructive episodes happened which actually diminished the value. And I would, again, I don't want to get technical.
I withdraw my question.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to get technical, but in fact, the commercial uses were discontinued for more than 6 months during that process. So there's a technical issue about the viability of the, the continuity of use. And another minor thing, which is that the excavation below existing grade in the warehouse building will mean that all the existing trees on this site will have to be removed in the course of construction, so that any trees that are shown would be major trees that would have to be brought in afterwards, and the appropriate kind of tree pits put in, because the impact of that construction inside the building would would wipe out those trees. But my main point is that this was carefully thought about. There is another viable direction here. There is no right to, the development under the current code, and I think it should be. There are enough questions that should be, and interpretations that it should be referred to the ZBA for them to look at in a very disciplined way, meeting the tests for things that don't comply. And I don't think a zoning, since we've went through a tumultuous process getting to the current zoning. I don't think undoing the zoning is in order. I think there is a viable future for the site with a much smaller scale development that meets the tests on Palisade Street and doesn't dwarf the little house next door and deprive its backyard of sunlight. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Question for Darius. Can we refer this to the ZBA?
No,
No?
it's not allowed in the state law. We went over this, I think, last,
Mhm.
2 months ago. The decision of the building inspector, there could be appeals from his decision to the zoning board, but you don't have the power to refer it to the ZBA.
So one more question, sorry Peggy, hold on one second. The non-conforming condition and building the new addition, then that would comply with the 27%, is that right? If one,
Coverage, it's already almost 100%, right? What's
Right.
73.
73% coverage?
no, but the point about a new addition being compliant, right? So you, let's say we disregard the existing parking structure, then the new construction would be basically the 27% coverage with the rear yard setback, front, all of those things on top of this tabula rasa.
That's up to an approving board. That's not up to an applicant.
No, I'm just saying, what I'm trying to get
No,
at.
what you're saying is whether, the fact that the lower, the parking structure is non-compliant, now you build on top of it, is that
It's
it's compliant now? That's
not,
right.
so you have an,
It's not compliant, it's not compliant, you can't say,
no, it's not.
bottom level is not compliant, it's pre-existing, not conforming, then I'll build on top of it, and that's conforming, no.
Well,
It's
if you-
something that gets taken into consideration when an approving board is evaluating it. We've often made that case. We've said we would like to get the variance because our addition does comply, and often that's enough for a zoning board to say, okay, since your addition is gonna comply, we'll grant you the variance, but it doesn't tell you you don't need the variance. Just one real quick thing, just because I wanted to substantiate what Darius just said. We made an application on another property here 2 months ago, and we were asked by this board to go to the zoning board. So I put a letter into the zoning board asking for an interpretation specifically on a number of points. And the village attorney called me up and he said, did you read this section of the state code? And I said, no. He said, read this. He read it to me on the phone, and it's very clear. We can't do that. We can get denied and we can appeal a decision, but we cannot ask the zoning board for an interpretation. That's the building inspector's job.
So-
I'd love to go to the zoning board. It'd be easy.
What I'm trying to get at is.
The MDR2 zone here
Yeah,
restricts the development pretty much to the back structure, unless you take down the parking lot, parking structure. Then they can build on 27%. That's legal.
no, but
That-
let's.
That would be permitted in the MDR2
I
zone.
respectfully disagree.
Well,
I mean,
thank
this
you.
is in many occasions.
Steve, I'll send you the state, Secretary of State analysis of how this works tomorrow.
I'll send you the secretary, I just had a conversation with, I'm sorry, with
Well, that's probably not the form that.
Natasha
You
Phillips.
disagree with me, I
Well,
understand.
no,
Interesting.
you know, it was confirmed by the local government, Chris Eastman and Natasha
I
Phillip,
don't know those people.
and that, and I'll send you the provision, we can have
Why
a
don't
separate
you
discussion.
talk about it?
We will have a separate, but in any event,
It's not gonna,
on quite a few occasions in this municipality and others, it's the new construction, the pre-existing non-conforming, no one's making people take that down. If the new construction is compliant, it's compliant, it meets the code. There's nothing about the sins of the past. There are all sorts of buildings where people do additions on one side, even though they have a side yard on the other side that's less than 10 feet from the property line. So it's well established that that principle applies, and it would apply here if somebody built on top.
thank you.
Okay, I'm Peggy Blizzard, 12 Chestnut Street. Something that has been on my mind for a long time. Why do we have zoning codes in the first place? Aren't they there to protect the homeowners who already live there, who own the property, who've lived there for years? It's to protect us from somebody like this coming in and just overwhelming us. So, you this, changing the zone is not fair. All you have to do, it seems, in this village is ask for a change of zoning and you get the change of zoning. That's not right. That's not what zoning codes were intended for in the first place. They should, this zoning code should not be changed. This project can go forward and it can work, and there's all sorts of other solutions. But before I get to that, let me say this. Our house, right at this moment, has a view of the river and the Palisades. And I know you don't take it seriously, but by God I do. And little by little, the developers have been chipping away. And that view,
Is this project in your view?
it will be if it is built 6 floors high. And not only will it destroy my view, it will destroy the view of the person who has just purchased the bank and plans to live there. That my whole western view will be wiped out. Now, it's my understanding, in fact, I was told by people who have served on these boards, all we have to do is get an expert to say the value of our house will decrease if that view is taken away. And by God, we will do it this time. Now, this project can work another way. On the building at 75 Main, instead of having retail on the bottom floor, since you have no parking for it anyway, use that space for parking for that building. And since you probably have to dig out anyway for the building in the back, put the parking underground. And that way you wouldn't have to change the zoning, I would think, make it a little bit smaller. There are many other ways. We don't have to have this monstrous building back there, and it is going to be a monstrous building. But you will take my view, and I'm sure the person from, I believe it's 81 Main Street, is going to be here tonight, and I think that that man will probably, and woman will probably explain that you will take away their view, and that's not fair. But think again about what I said about zoning codes. Why do we have them in the first place? Think of all those little houses, little people who live on that street, have always lived there, thought they had something that would last forever. All of a sudden, somebody comes from out of town they've never put in a second in volunteer work, they've never done anything for this village, and yet they want to come in and wipe out everything we have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd ask if others want to speak to this issue, but I will say that we had many comments last month, and we appreciate them, and we appreciate the comments tonight, but we have a long agenda, and I'm not going to do an Ed Plotkin on you, but I think we need to restrict the comments tonight, so. Yes, please. Yes.
My name's Kevin Hartnett. I'm the owner of the property at 98 Palisade Street.
Right.
And I, like Steve Tilley and Peggy, very concerned about the size of the structure and what the impact is particularly on the area of Palisade Street, both not only going towards the train station, but obviously coming back up from the train station. Additionally, very concerned about the additional retail space that's being proposed for Chestnut Street and the impact that will have on already overstressed parking capability within the downtown area. So without being very specific, just generally, it just seems to be much too big and too much of a mixed use with the retail space.
Good. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, Ms. Florin, please be at the microphone.
I'm Pam Florin. I live at 110 Palisade Street, and we're 3 houses up from the corner, and we have no parking. And I can't in my mind vision, if you're only allowing 1 parking space for each of those units, where are these other people going to park? That's for one thing. The other thing is, and I can't see it from these drawings, and Kevin probably is concerned also, what is the window situation on the north side of these buildings? We don't see that. Do you have an architectural plan for that?
I'll show right now.
Okay, all right, so we see all of these apartments, which supposedly are going to be blocked by trees going up in between Kevin's house and the project. And you just said you're gonna cut down the trees to build buildings.
That was Steve in the audience,
Well, you're gonna have to do the construction.
No, that's not true, I don't know where that information came from.
You have to use the mic.
My brain, that's where it came from.
Pam,
I'm not
Pam.
quoting anybody.
Pam, use the mic, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Well, they mentioned here tonight cutting down trees, and I'm for it if you have to do it. I'd like to get rid of a couple in my yard, but, but I'm looking at all these windows that are going to be facing north, which the people are going to be able to see, not only, well, Doubledays is back there someplace. They're gonna be seeing into Anna Caraco's house, and they're gonna be looking at our house from their bird's eye view. And that to me is not very comfortable, because that hasn't been the way it's been. It's been, you know, they're there, and especially the people that have bought the bank building. I don't know, is that white building
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
That's the bank building? You're not gonna have any kind of a view of the river. We only see it in the summertime, I mean in the wintertime, when there's no leaves and we see this much. But the parking is gonna be a disastrous thing. It already is on our street. And if people don't do anything about it, this village is gonna be up in arms, and people are gonna be moving away. They'll be building retail on a street and nobody will be there.
Thank you.
Can I just say,
Yes, please.
I'm just gonna weigh in on the parking, you know. I did park.
Use the mic.
I did park on Palisades to come here, so there is a parking problem. And I did talk to the architect, and what I'm proposing that we do is dig a little deeper, and we can put additional, we can add maybe additional 8 spaces by putting lifts in, maybe 8 lifts. So we'll just have 8 lifts for the people who have 2 cars, they can use a lift, so we're gonna try
What is
to.
a lift? A lift is an elevator in England.
A lift is, we can accommodate people who have 2 cars. It's like a New York City application. You pull your car in and it elevates, and then you put your
And you
car
park
down.
underneath it, yeah.
But that will address at least 40 spots, which is, you know.
Well, that would be acceptable. Yes.
Just following from what Bart said, we are doing a parking and traffic study. So we're hoping to have that for you at the next meeting. It's being done by a traffic engineer. They're analyzing current use of the building. If it was, you know, fully occupied, what that would be. We were trying to get them to go back and do what the original use was, and they said it's been too many years, so they're not gonna do that. But we'll have an evaluation of that. We're also part of something that's starting, which is kind of interesting, not this project, but I think it's gonna be something that all of us will be interested in soon, which is the idea, it's a version of zip cars, but what it is instead of zip cars being open to the public, 2 zip cars will be located, say, in this garage, available to any of the residents of the building, covered in their condo fees. So somebody comes up here, they have 1 car, they don't need 2 cars at that time when the one guy's going and the other person needs a car, they can use the zip car. If you find that there is not enough availability of it, you add more zip cars. The cost on having the car is about $450 a month. So if you had 24 condo units, what we worked out was 24 condo units paying $40 a month for the right to use it, and then you charge the individuals who used it, you'd actually be able to operate with a profit. So I think it's a solution for a lot of
Can
projects.
I use the zip car?
No. The zip car in this case would be available only to the residents of the building, but I think it's a solution, it's a Rob Barron kind of solution, looking at how do we just reduce the number of cars that people have to have.
Just one more thing on parking.
Yeah, yes, Bruce.
One more thing on parking. The commuters are the problem on Palisades. The commuters are parking on Palisades. If you guys implement a 4-hour parking and execute it, the commuters will go away, Palisades will have their parking. I'm not looking to solve the problem, but that is a problem, and that's the solution to the problem.
Well, why did you park on
Whoa, whoa. What, I was gonna ask, Donna, do you wanna add anything about what's happening on Palisade with parking?
What's happening in Palisade, at the moment, we're still discussing, but we are looking I don't know whether you know or not, but the governor last week signed the bill that we now have home rule here in Dobbs Ferry in the downtown, so we now can establish resident-only parking zones. So at the moment, but this specifically because of the commuters and our proximity to the train station. That is why we were granted this privilege. So we are in the process of looking at how we are going to manage this. It's not quite as simple as it seems, because what you do on one street automatically affects all the other streets. We have to look at it a little holistically, but it is being looked at. So hopefully, and there will be a public hearing before this is instituted, so everybody can have a say. But we are looking to institute the home rule, which should help solve the commuter parking problem in residential areas in the downtown.
Maybe mention the streets.
Palisades, Riverside, Hatch, Oak, Elm, Walnut, Chestnut, and, Broadway, yeah.
That was taken out.
Pardon me?
That Broadway was taken out.
Oh, Broadway may have been taken out, but whatever, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Vincent Vecchio, 120 Virginia Avenue, Dobbs Ferry. Everyone here has made a lot of valid points tonight, and the three things that stuck out to me the most was variances. Half the town is miserable with what happened with Walgreens. We'll mention it again. Patty just said something about a traffic study that we're going to do for this building. There was a traffic study done for Rivertown Square. Has anyone seen Dobbs Ferry recently? It takes you a half hour to get through Dobbs Ferry. And number three, the person that said the commuter parking is the problem in this town isn't a Dobbs Ferry resident. I pay $20,000 a year in taxes. I don't need someone telling me what the problem is where I can park. All right? This gentleman's applying for this building. He doesn't even own the building. The fact that we're acknowledging it is annoying me like crazy.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ed Hardesty, 199 Palisade Avenue. I'm clearly, and I've sat for the last several meetings listening to one after another talk and voice their objections, which is great, and I respect that. And I want to shout out to Brian. That was tough to stand up here like that. I commend that. I know you got some grief for that, for a decision like that, to stand up like that. But I want to preface what I say, because I'm clearly a proponent of this, that I came up here, my wife Teresa Ferraro and I moved up here after 9/11 from the city. I was in the North Tower when the planes hit. We lived across the street. She was in the apartment. It was destroyed. We lost everything we owned. We came up here in October of 2001, and the word sanctuary was really very prevalent for us. That was a very, very difficult time. And we were a broker's dream. I bought the first house I saw the first day. I literally walked in and I went, oh, home, I'll take it. Teresa said, okay, let's do it. Because the house went home, and we looked around, and the village that we saw was safe. It was special. It was different. It was a sanctuary for us. You know, I've loved everything about it. We've been involved for 10 years, 12 years now, on the Dobbs Ferry School Foundation, raising money. I host a live auction. She's been on the board for years. We're part of this community. I love the village feel. I love the feel of community around it. I like the people. I like everything about it. I love the little red bags on the parking meters at Christmas. Or holiday, whatever. I just think, I really do get it. I really do love it. And I would never, never, never intentionally do something that I thought was to the detriment of this village. You know, I've sat and listened, and I want to touch on just a couple of points. I've been a real estate broker for 22 years. I'm obviously involved in orchestrating and putting this deal together. Okay, let me try to do it in order. I hear parking, but what people aren't realizing is that the people that are going to buy these apartments, one thing I do know about this, God, there's a lot that I don't. One thing I do know about are the demographics that drive the real estate market and the types of people that are looking to do certain things right now and in the future, and where those trends are going. There's a lot of studies and a lot of work being done on that. The people that are going to buy this apartment are not the people with 4 kids and they're running around to the soccer games on Saturday and they have the SUV and the minivan and all of that stuff. They're going to live up on the hill in the houses. You know, and they're going to be there and they're going to do that and they're going to have multiple cars. The people that are coming in here are the millennials, Because I have a 25-year-old daughter, we have a niece, they're priced out of the city. Average price point in the city is $1.8 million for an apartment. Not very many of us can do that. They're starting to come up here. We had a niece just bought up here. She moved back in, she's coming back. They have, if anything, one car. They're gonna come up because they're used to, there's a trend now down to smaller apartments, that sort of housing. They're used to living that way. They want to be able to walk to the train, and they want to be able to walk out into a vibrant downtown area. They want to be able to go out to the restaurants. They want to be able to spend money. They want to go down to Doubledays or to Celtic Corner or wherever and have a drink with their friends, and they want to be able to walk down to the train. That's one car. And I'm not even going to touch on, I think the zip cards is a great idea. I just had a client up here, he said, so where are the Ubers? The trend is in 10 years, none of us will be parking anyway because we're not going to be driving. Look at this, look at what's going on around you and read up on it. That's all changing, and we won't even get into that. But we're looking at a vision plan for the village. This is something that's going to be 10 or 15 or 20 years out. What's best? What's the plan? And we're really focused and worried about issues that at times can be annoying, I get it, but in the long run aren't going to be an issue. We've demonstrated that we can provide the parking spaces. The other people that are going to buy these are the aging baby boomers. You know, the kids are gone, they're in the houses up on the hill, and I can't tell you how many times we have people that we talk to that go, God, I would love to sell my house, but where am I going to go? You know, I've lived in Dobbs for 40 years, I love this village, but I can't afford to sell my house and move anywhere. I don't want to move out, and I really don't know what to do. They're downsizing their lives, they don't want the taxes, they don't want all that space. I drive around at night, and like Patty was when he was reading this thing, I don't see so well anymore, you know, at night. I'm not looking to have a bunch of big things, I'm looking to downsize that. Most of those people, a lot of them are not even going to spend the whole year here. But that's the target audience. You know how many people are looking for something like this? And it's a market, and we did it very intentionally. The size of the apartments and all of that stuff so that you hit a demographic that does that. So I don't think the parking is going to be a problem. Yes, sir.
It's a great sales pitch.
It's not a sales pitch. I don't want to, and I wanted to say something too. You asked a great question of Mr. Tilley, and that's why has this building been sitting here? You need to understand something. I've been looking at this building for at least 10 years. I've worked with multiple developers, big guys out of the city, all sorts of different people, and I'm going to tell you something. I know them, and I've known these guys for a long time. Some of those guys aren't really great. You know, I promise you, do not have the best interest of this town in their mind when they look at something like that. But the reason and the only answer to that question is it doesn't work. No one is going to come in and renovate this. And I hear people talk about all these plans with these other options. Why hasn't somebody done it? Because the bottom line is, from a developer point of view, to come in and renovate a building like that doesn't make economic sense if you can't do those 3 floors. And we've already stepped it back a lot. Took a big hit on it. If you can't do that, you'll never get this. And I've watched that building deteriorate, and it sits there and it's going to fall apart. Right now, Arpad's very modest. I've known this guy for 22 years in the city by reputation and personally. He's considered one of the best in the world at restoring old buildings and making them something new into their new life. It's what he does really, really well. Great team. So if you don't get this team pulled together, and I've got to say something, Mr. Tilley said something with all due respect, this is important. He said, oh, you'll just downsize it and the contract will change. So he has no idea what the terms of this are. If this doesn't work like this, it doesn't work. You've heard Patty say, this isn't a, oh, sorry, we're going to give you $1 million less. It works like this, and we've scaled it back to the point where beyond that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. You've got a window here where you can get something really beautiful done with this building. And that's the trade, is to have that there. We've addressed everything else, and I can guarantee you, I know these people for a long time, they're looking to do something special. They're not looking to throw up something and make it Yonkers, they're not looking to do that. And if you don't vitalize this, if you don't draw people in, because that's what draws people into this village, and that's what drives values on houses. Okay, so
thank you.
We move forward.
Thank you. Just, I see 3 hands, and that'll be it for tonight. We get repetitive on these things.
Eileen Hollick, 110 Palisade Street. Not going to rehash the parking issue, other than to say when construction comes up, that will be a parking disaster because you're going to rope off the construction areas. You got all those construction workers who are going to park someplace. My concern is the children who go to Memorial Park. What is the safety factor being considered with the children that are using the park directly across the street? My other concern is once you get construction going, you're going to have heavy equipment, you're going to have vibrations. There are a lot of old houses in that area. What is that going to do to their foundations, particularly the church across the street and the houses nearest this construction site?
Thank you.
Those are very good questions.
Sir?
They need to be addressed.
Larry Taylor, 81 Buena Vista. I want to speak in favor of this project. I'll say that at the beginning, and I'll be brief to respect the committee's time. I've been involved in a number of projects around the downtown and spent a lot of time with the people who are running businesses in the downtown. And as a resident, a longtime resident of the village and the river towns, it's very important to me and very important to my family that we have a vibrant town, a town that you can walk around in, a town that you can enjoy, a town that has successful businesses, where there are residents who work in the village and business owners who are committed to providing great restaurants, great shops, great services. And the difference between having a deteriorating building that has been essentially empty, think about downtown Hastings, versus having a viable building that's going to bring a number of new residents into the downtown, as a couple of other speakers have pointed out, who are mostly going to walk around the downtown when they're in Dobbs Ferry. I think the difference is night and day. And between everybody in this room, there's got to be a way to figure out how to make that work for the future of the village as a whole.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, and our last speaker.
I'm Suzanne Stanzo. I live on Palisade Street. I've lived there for 40 years. I've lived in Dobbs Ferry for 62 years. And many of these people, can you hear me? Okay. The people who are for this project are talking in terms of theory and statistics. I'm talking in terms of what actually exists 24 hours a day. They say the residential parking permits are good because they'll get rid of the commuter problem. Well, all night long, I'm scared to take my car out because I can't come back home. It's even denser at night when everyone is home than during the day. And the people who live there on the street either don't know that this is even being proposed or are by no means happy with it. So all these, oh, the new people are going to not have cars, the new people are going to walk, the new people are going to this and that. They're people. We have people there now that are nothing like this description of these new people, and we want to have a nice community. And what's being proposed, I'm sure you can make something good out of that building. You don't have to let it rot. But why make something that is so unsuited to the situation? And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanzo. Thank you all for your comments.
Fred Kearns, 126 Palisade Street. I was just wondering about this gentleman concerned that this was his sanctuary. Well, I wonder if we put this on Palisade Avenue rather than Palisade Street, how much of a sanctuary that would be. Also, we have not only a parking problem down there, we have a big traffic problem. We have 4 bus stops. We have commuters back and forth, not just parking here, but going to the train every morning who fail to stop for every stop sign that there is there. Also, the fact that we now have inherited a parking lot at the north end of Palisade Street with 300 cars for Mercy College. Now, those people do not live in Dobbs Ferry. They come from wherever. They come through Ashford Avenue, Broadway, Livingston Avenue, and they all come to Palisade Street. Now, that means there is quite a traffic problem. So I just can't understand how we're so concerned about getting enough parking for that one building when we're not even mentioning the fact of the traffic and how much it affects that street. It's out of control. Thank you.
I heard your comments at the Board of Trustees meeting recently, and many other residents, I understand that. Thank you very much. And thank you all very much. It's very helpful, obviously, to this board and to the Board of Trustees if, depending on our recommendation in our consideration, and we appreciate that very much. I would like to move to our next.
Want to adjourn the public hearing to the next?
Yeah, I'd like to adjourn this public hearing to the next meeting. I move that. Is there a second? Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is item 4, which, as I announced earlier, we're not doing. Next item.
100.
Oh, I see, it's 100 million. Item 3, I'm sorry. Continuation of public hearing for site plan review of the Board of Trustees, 100 Main Street.
Sure, everyone has to leave. Do you want any kind of presentation tonight? Because there's no change to the last
No,
one.
actually, no.
I don't, that's good.
What was the question?
Why don't
He's going to show the current design.
Yeah.
What do you want me to show?
I want you to wait till the people leave the room.
But Javier was asking me to show something?
Well, you made some modifications to the design that we saw last time.
No, we've changed nothing since the last, what we presented to you at the September meeting is the same as we have now.
Did it have the mansard roof? I
The
thought it had-
mansard roof is on the plan.
Patty, in the last project, there was a thumb drive. Can you provide that to Brian and also the
Yeah.
photos, please? Do we have
Yep,
those?
sure.
Thank you.
You look puzzled. Tell me what you're missing.
I think we should have a view of what it is you're proposing up on the screen.
Why don't we?
You have something, I mean, I have to set this up.
Oh.
Do that. It's not a problem. Or we can work from the boards. Is that, I mean, public can't see that. But is that good enough for what you're?
What's your opinion? I mean, I have my copy, I just think people came to see something and talk about it.
Yeah, you've got drawings.
It's not for me, it's,
Oh, they should have gone to the library.
Use the microphone.
The voice from above. I think you might have to load it into the laptop.
Thank you, Liz. Do you want me to get the laptop going?
I mean, for
Do
the
you have another
benefit.
thing on the agenda you want to do that while I set it up? I don't mind, it's fine.
Let me see.
I just don't want to waste, 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
Is the public interested in seeing this on the screen?
This is 100, Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
what do we go into the bank?
Yeah, the bank.
We could, you
Yeah.
know what we could do?
More guys could go home after that. Yeah.
What we could do, yeah. Item 8 on the agenda is referral from the Board of Trustees for site plan review for proposed mixed-use building on property located at 81 Main Street.
Wow.
He's setting up something else, so we're filling in the time.
Which is more interesting, actually.
Much simpler, I think. And deserving of a waiver.
I don't know about this.
So, hello, William Alicia, I'm an architect, representing Dwayne Prieto for 81 Main Street. 81 Main Street is a very simple ask. It's only an interior job. As you all know, it's the bank building. And what we're proposing in the plans are to have a mixed-use building. The uses in the front of the building will be sort of connected to what Dobbs Ferry is looking for. It'll be offices for Mr. Prieto himself, so it'll be single user. Just in the front section of the building, there'll be a mezzanine for the office above the first floor. And then at the 3/4 of the rest of the building would be for residential use. One family. That's Mr. Prieto's family. So the bulk of the work is really just rehabbing what's there. There'll be addition of 2 mezzanines, one in front, one in the back. As I stated earlier, the front mezzanine is strictly for office use. So you come into the building, there'll be offices just in the front and then the front mezzanine. As you proceed through the space, it'll be the rest be residential use, with the mezzanine on the back section used for a master bedroom suite. The building falls within all the parameters of the downtown business use. It's actually under the height restriction. It'll be one residence. There'll be a waiver required for just the residential use on the ground floor in the rear section. And that's it. The parking requirement will be one unit, one residential unit. So that's one car for that. And I estimated the commercial, the office area to be 1,000 square feet. That's another car. We've made provisions for an easement to access the rear yard, which can accommodate those two cars. With that easement, that'll be a third car. That's the bulk of the application.
So the easement would allow you to park on someone else's property?
Not only, it provide access to the rear yard of the site, as well as providing that additional space. Sorry, I don't have a.
Do you have that easement already?
It's working and in place. We don't have the documents tonight, but we should have that by end of next week.
Now, doesn't that easement affect 75 million? Is that, it's a different one.
It's at let's see, the parking will be coming through the 98 Palisades Avenue. That's the access through there.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you can see the site plan here. This is the site plan. This is the building here. It's 2 in from the corner on Main Street. And access to the rear yard would be through that 98 Palisades, through this dark gray area, which will access the rear yard of the existing building, which will provide, it's a 27-foot wide rear yard, which will provide easy parking for 2 spaces.
I should just say, I should have said at the beginning, we are delighted to see that building find an appropriate use. It's been sitting there, it's a wonderful building. It's a wonderful building, and nobody has had the imagination to use it. So I'm delighted to welcome you to Dobbs Ferry, and the fact that you're using this building is great for the village.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most simple renovations I've done. We're just fixing up the existing structure for the most part, just adding usability by adding those mezzanines.
Yeah. It's an interesting case for us because it's a residential use in the downtown area. Maybe Mike could explain, what our options are here.
From the floor plans, it looked like we were entering directly into the residential space, but what you're saying is that front area is actually office.
That's correct, yeah.
So with that, it's an office with residential, but still on the first floor. So a waiver is required for the first floor occupancy with residential. But given the rather simple nature of the site planning issues on it, this might be a good consideration just to waive it. We're only making a recommendation. We do need a bit of information for that easement area where the parking would be, and drainage and stuff related to that. There's also a roof deck that's proposed.
We're actually not, we want to keep it simple to move this along. So we're not even going to engage a roof deck at this point. So we want to keep it as an interior renovation. It's taken a lot of dollars to bring back the old building. And I think we were sort of like focus on just getting the interior going with the parking at the rear. We're pulling out any deck issues at this point and probably into the future. So the waiver would be for that residential use on the ground floor, which it makes sense as one family how you're going to get to that mezzanine. Right. And for site plan review, would be those 2 waivers requested. Right.
So the rear mezzanine section is labeled office, but that's bedroom, I assume?
That was mislabeled, actually. That's a bedroom, right?
Thank you.
We'll make those corrections and resubmit.
Yeah. So
I think the conditions would be the typical ones would be, if we decided to go this way, would be a conditional waiver of site plan review recommendation to the Board of Trustees. And the conditions would be to correct the floor plan to show the bedroom location and label the front office as front office. Those are the interior things, and then we would need the 2 parking spaces. We would need evidence of the easement to the our legal review, and then the actual layout, little site planning piece for that small rear yard would be subject to final review by the village engineer for drainage and other things like that. I think that pretty much covers the type of stuff that would be needed.
I assume you have 1 parking space on the street. You have 25-foot lot, so should equate to 1 space, I would think.
We can take one from the street, so, yeah.
You're only gonna be able to fit 1 space in the rear yard?
We can fit 2, actually. I think we're gonna go for the 2, so we'll over-park,
In the-
you know.
Right.
That's a rarity.
I know.
In this town.
It's like everybody's finding space. We have a couple extras.
Do you have zip cars, or you don't have?
You can rent one out.
Would we be moving too fast to make a motion subject to the conditions?
I think it's a recommendation, I'll go to the Board of Trustees anyway. You should dot all your i's and cross all your t's, and it'll go to the Board of Trustees for final approval.
Dwight, there was a mention of a requirement for a special permit. Is that
That was,
anything?
when we looked at the floor plans, it didn't look like it was entering into the commercial space, but as it's been, when we
Yeah,
get that
we-
property labeled, we would be able to treat it then as needing a waiver for residential on the first floor, but it would be treated as a mixed-use building there.
Well, I would move that we make this recommendation to the Board of Trustees,
Subject to.
subject to whatever legal counsel and Dwight, and what we've talked about tonight.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome again. All right, we'll go back to, where are we? Back to 100 Main Street.
100 Main, Javi, so that we don't go through stuff people don't need to see. Is there something specific that you want to go to?
Just the view from.
I don't think we need to go through most of these things. I mean, do you want to see the renderings?
That's fine.
Yeah.
This good? So we're, at the last meeting, the board effectively said that it felt that the building that we were proposing was too large, that although it complies with zoning in terms of height and coverage and all of those things, it just feels that it's too large. The board asked us to consider cutting the number of units from 4 to 3. We went back and took a look at the economics on it, and that does not make sense. At that point, we would go back to our original application, which would be to build the 12 residential units with a 2-level parking garage and do a whole new building in the front. That's not something I'm necessarily interested in being part of. I got involved in this because I thought it would be more interesting to do something more like what we've ended up with, but I don't know the property. So that's what you guys asked us to do. We can't cut it. So if you want to recommend denial, that's where we go.
I think the other thing that was brought up was taking off that floor and essentially filling the site out to the sidewalk, right? And we.
Right, and at some point I have to, say what, I do get to have an opinion. And in my opinion, as the person doing the design, if I were to fill this in to get the additional square footage, to eliminate the top off of this, I've put more shadow on the street, I've walled in the street, I need a waiver for site, exceeding the site coverage. I cannot get a variance for that because I have the ability to comply, and I think council will confirm for me that if I can comply, I can't get a variance just because I'd like to do something different. So I think that's a very large stretch, and I don't think it will come out anywhere near as nice a building. The third story on this building is not something, at the last meeting, Javier, I think you mentioned concern with seeing it from Broadway. But we did do a complete visual analysis of this, which you guys should all have gotten a copy of. I think we went into detail on some of the points. You can't see this from Broadway. You can see it from Optimum. You see it obviously from Elm Street. You see it from the Aqueduct. But as we've documented at previous meetings, there's an existing garage structure on the property which obscures your views to the west. So we would have to take that down and the building in front and the buildings across the street before we would be opening up any views. We're not blocking any views from the aqueduct of the river. We're not blocking any views that exist now from the parking lot. You saw the photographs. We are affecting the view, not blocking it, but affecting the view as you walk up Oak Street. And that's not to diminish that, but I think it's important that we're not obscuring the view, we're fitting in with the panorama of the downtown. So those are the impacts on view. The economics of it is that this is a contribution to the value of the downtown. We get additional tax revenue, we get 4 more apartments for people to live in, we comply with the parking requirements, we meet all the other code issues. There was some mention of us needing a variance or a waiver of some sort, but I'm not sure what that actually is. This is in the, in the notes from Han and from Dwight, from George and Dwight. But the way we look at it, we're compliant. We think that this is the best way to do it. We have been here much too long. This has gone on now to February of 2014, and we have looked at this in so many different ways. That chart we have, I mean, it's I didn't make that to try and be dramatic, but it starts to be, when you start realizing the number of submissions we have on this, I mean, we understand there are people who are upset that there's going to be something changed. We understand that there's concerns that people have that there's going to be more people in downtown. We understand that this will generate some additional traffic. There will be 4 more units that people will drive to that they don't currently drive to in Dobbs Ferry. And there are issues with traffic in the downtown. I think we're going to all learn that those lights on Ashford would have been much better as stop signs, but I know that's not as dramatic as putting in great big lights that are blinking in some of these windows. So, there are issues with traffic. My personal beliefs in this are not secret. I mean, I write about this. I think if the more we have people living in the downtown who can live, work, play, worship, shop in the downtown without getting in their car, the better. And the fact that you can walk right to the train station from here and you've got bus service to here, I think that's going to be something that's really beneficial in the difference between wealth and prosperity. Basically, we want to be a more prosperous community, not necessarily a more wealthy community. The difference is in wealthy people, it's a matter of whether you can own a car. In a very wealthy society, even poor people can own a car. In a prosperous society, even rich people will use the mass transit. To do that, we have to have the ridership, we have to have the other things happen. Maybe that's a dream. I think it's one that I'd like to see happen, but that's not what's on the table tonight. What's on the table tonight is a very simple 4 units being added to the back of a property. I think we're around all the issues about multiple buildings, one building that's attached. The building department has opined that it's a single structure. We are way below what the required height is permitted in the zone. If we look, and I understand that there's a way that it's measured right now, which I don't agree with, and we have shown it complying with what would be hopefully the new way. This is what the height permitted in the zoning district is right now. We have taken what we've proposed. I know people get angry that I propose things that changes to the code, but what I proposed was that all buildings on Main Street should be measured from the sidewalk to the midpoint of the building to 50 feet, and that should be carried straight back. And nothing on the site should be permitted to be taller than that. And it sounds like there might, despite the fact that that was something that I recommended, it might actually be adopted. It would take off the ability, if somebody wasn't doing this, of building a bigger building. And I don't think it should be built bigger than this, but I think this is the right size. So you guys have your job to do, and I'm tired of talking about this building.
We did draft a resolution based on our discussion last month, which I think there was a general consensus that the scale of the mid-building could be cut down by a story, and that would result in a loss of 1 unit. Based on that, it is a recommendation. The actual final design of the buildings goes to the Architectural and Historic Review Board for their review and approval. And but our recommendation would go to the Board of Trustees. And I've drafted that. I don't know if that's exactly what we wanted to do, but that's what I heard from the last meeting, and it says basically that the present application would be denied, but in the event they wanted to approve it, it should be approved with one less unit with the mass of that one building taken down, a story. And then there's other conditions in there related to, the previous things have been offered to offer to the state to assist with the maintenance of the Old Croton Aqueduct landscaping along the perimeter of that site. There's a few things like, and enable access to the stone wall if the state needed to get access to it. So those things are still carried forward as in the recommendations that are in the draft resolution. And I would concur at least with what Patty said about this has been through a lengthy process. We've come to a fork in the road where the applicant is unwilling or unable, we'll say unable, we might say unwilling to reduce the density by the 1 unit and take the height off of that. But that's why this resolution's there, and we've hashed this thing through 10 different ways, so I don't know what else we could do with it.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. In the environmental assessment form, you checked off the box that said that something in that site is in the National Register, State or National Register of Historic Places.
It's called the Aqueduct.
Oh, okay. There wasn't anything on the site?
No.
Okay.
I do agree that the aqueduct is.
Yeah, no, it didn't specify what that was, so maybe you found something there that I didn't know.
No. And just snuck it into the EAF, sure.
Well, I'll just say that, you know, obviously this took a very long time to come to this point, but I think it's drastically improved from where it started.
I would agree.
You know, we don't, you know, the barn memory is there, I suppose, and mostly it, I think, is respectful of the aqueduct and the height and the approach to, or the view from the aqueduct, that this is not a front door, it's not, you know, a lot of windows and so forth. So I think it's much improved, and I wanted to explore this idea of reducing that top story, but I understand the ramifications from what you've written and said, that it would fill the site more completely and require a waiver.
Yeah, the waiver that we put in the resolution, I'm pleased to hear, but we have not seen for the record that the building department has determined that this is now one building. So that waiver is in the event that that isn't exactly settled, or until that point at which the building department opines and say, now the connector building between the existing building and the proposed new does tie the buildings together and can be treated as one building. So they would not need a waiver for that requirement regarding 2 units being only in the front building and treating it as a complex.
But we would need it if we increased from 80% site coverage to 98% site coverage. If we filled that area in, that would need a waiver, and that, I think that's significant.
Yeah, I think it would be a much less attractive building for the sake of getting a story off the top. It would be a big block of a building, basically.
Right. So maybe this is really the best design. Maybe you want to put that in, but I'm not voting, and I'd like to never come back and talk about this one again.
Yeah. Well, I think it is, and I think you've come a long way on this, and many of the sketches and simulations that you've shown demonstrate that while it is bigger, and I think that the issue that many people on the board have had and the neighbors have had is that it's different. It's a change, and it's not really, is this a good or bad design? It's just that it's different and it's bigger, and it fills up space. I think you've demonstrated pretty clearly that that the views are not substantially changed from where they are now in terms of by season or anything else. It's just, so the reaction that we've had and the neighbors have had is the fairly dramatic change in a building that people, you know, had a particular feeling about. And I think in some sites it wouldn't have been, the reaction wouldn't have been the same, but in this site it was particularly, so. Well,
the other thing that should be mentioned is the parking. you know, that you were able to get, that we're not, you know, doing pileup or whatever, you accommodated
Right.
the parking here kind of from the
And,
outset.
and I think that process with this board worked well. I mean, we proposed no parking on the site, a one-story shorter building, putting the pileup with the parking lot across the street. This board gave serious consideration to that and then came back and said, no, you know what? We want the parking spaces. We don't want you to be relying upon anything other than the cars that you can put on site, and that's what we've done.
This is a public hearing, it's a continuation of a public hearing, and I see one hand, please.
My name is Ann Zenke, and I live at 19 Oak Street. And just for the record, to be perfectly honest, my view is affected. My deck view and my dining room view are very affected and block the river by this project. That being said, I also have a question about, in general, about the parking on this project and on other projects, although clearly we're not gonna need parking in 10 years.
I did like that.
As a purchaser or a renter, am I compelled, or is it in my lease or my purchase, that that parking space comes with my unit? Because if not, I can choose not to purchase a parking space in that building for an additional cost to my rent or my purchase price, and I can put my car on the street, and I can take advantage of the new project, and I can even get perhaps maybe $25, $50 permit instead of paying $300 to park in that garage.
Are we talking about?
Am I compelled as an owner to purchase a spot in your garage, or does it come with the cost of my unit?
It should, in my opinion, come with the cost of the unit,
But what
but
makes it
I think
cost?
what can make that happen is they can add that to the resolution. That the parking that's there is specifically intended for the use by the residents of this place and not by
So
anyone
I
else.
can't opt to buy a $25 permit under the new thing and park my car on the street instead of paying a few $100s to park in that building.
Yeah, we've never talked about charging any additional for the parking.
But you've never not talked about it.
Right.
You've not said that space is part of my
I
purchase.
didn't, because I didn't think of it. And now that you're mentioning it, you know,
It goes for
you
all
live,
of the other projects in this
you
village.
live on Oak Street. I live all the way around the corner on Broadway. I agree with you. I think the parking for the people who live in this place
But
should be
I'm
on their
saying,
site,
when
and that
one-
should be a requirement.
But when one proposes these developments,
Mhm.
what compels the person who's doing the development to sell those units with parking spaces included?
It has to
in
be
the
in,
purchase
it has to
price?
be in the resolution. And it should be.
That goes for all of
Well,
these
well,
units that are
there's
being
parking,
constructed.
I mean, there's parking requirements in our code, so that they have to have so many parking units, in this
I
case,
understand that, but I can opt as a
however many,
purchaser
but-
not to buy it. If
No,
the
no.
spot is for sale, I don't have to buy it. I can buy a permit for the street.
No, you're not, I haven't seen anywhere you're buying,
I've seen it.
In the-
I'm
not
sure.
in this
And
building.
Worse,
Oh, no, sure.
worse than that,
Sure.
because it doesn't, it's even worse, in my opinion, is I have a couple of clients who own garages. And this board has basically said, what are you using your garage for? And you got kind of a mealy answer, that it wasn't straightforward until you guys insisted, if he goes ahead and does the work on this house on Broadway, he's got to use the garage that's there for the parking of the people who live in the building. Because he wasn't, he was storing stuff there. So, you know, I think that's a very good point, and maybe something that we need, you know, we're always looking for more things to put on the list to change in the code.
That's a very good.
Yeah.
Or the other project,
You
that
you
other
can't force
project,
people to
those
park
parking
there if
spaces
they
can
want to
be
get a
sold
permit, they can
independent
get a
of the
permit
train
too.
parkers.
Yeah, but like.
They can be
Sussex
sold
all across
independent of the owners, but the owners on
Parking
the
spaces
street
in
and
the-
sell those as
If
commuter
Very
parking,
expensive.
as
Most
additional
people park
income.
on the street.
Right.
They're
We
empty
actually had
spaces
to
inside
talk
the building.
to
That's
Project
across the street
75
from me.
Main, you're referring to about
Why didn't they charge us
numbering
all?
those spaces and dedicating them to the apartments. So that had come up in
Yeah,
the
it's a
discussion.
good point.
We can add a clause in the resolution that the spaces be numbered and dedicated to each of the apartments on site.
But that's not the full issue. The full issue is I still can opt to park on the street. If the parking spot is sold separate from my apartment.
Right, no, this is a good point.
If it's sold separate from my apartment, I can opt not to purchase that parking spot in the building. And I can purchase to park on the street and yet double up the problem on the street. It'll save me money.
But we will compel the owner of the building, presuming this is more likely to be apartments than for sale, but it could be either, as you
Either
say.
way.
But that we will require that the individual parking spaces be dedicated to the individual apartments.
More policing.
That we can do.
And again, I didn't think of how it could be abused, but in all the other things that we've done, Wits End, Livingston Ridge, trying to-
Some people park on Clinton Avenue.
What, no, but they have their assigned parking and they can't separate it from, they can't give their parking to someone else. They can't rent, they can't opt out from having that be their parking space and provide it to someone else.
Are they paying an additional cost
Nope.
for that parking space?
No, it goes with
That's the
their,
issue.
yeah, it
Okay,
goes
that's
with
the
their
issue.
unit. Same thing with Livingston Ridge. Those units, they have their
That's the
parking,
one
it's
issue
assigned
that
parking.
satisfies it.
Yeah. But that's because that was the way it was in those two, because it was in the offering zone.
Well, that's-
And so here, where you've got rental properties, you might need to have something that is in, so if the building department learned that the units were, the parking spaces were being separated from it, they'd be able to step in and say, you can't do that, it's against the code. The resolution says they had to be used with the apartments.
Okay, thank you.
Good point.
Okay. Thank you. We have a resolution drafted consistent with Mr. Douglas's comments earlier. And let me read this resolution, and then we can discuss it. Village of Dobbs Ferry Planning Board recommendation to the Board of Trustees regarding site plan approval for a proposed building at 100 Main Street, whereas an application has been received by the Village of Dobbs Ferry Planning Board from Gotham Design for the construction of an additional building at 100 Main Street, together with related parking and site improvements in the DB zone. And whereas the following plans and documents have been submitted in support of the application, which is a much shorter list than actually has happened, I'm sure. And whereas the Village of Dobbs Ferry Planning Board is inspected and is familiar with the site and is considered the April 8, 2015 staff report prepared by the village's consulting engineer and has reviewed the plans and documents submitted by the applicant and listed above. And whereas the subject application abuts an historically significant and listed Old Croton Aqueduct, it must be classified as a type 1 action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And whereas a lengthy series of public hearings and work sessions has been held to provide for both public input and discussion by and between members of both the Planning Board and the Architecture and Historic Review Board and with the applicant. The last of these meetings was a public hearing held on October 8, 2015. And whereas the Village of Dobbs Ferry Planning Board has taken note of the applicant's efforts to address certain concerns related to the building massing, on-site park, and visual impacts to the Old Croton Aqueduct, but has determined that additional plan modifications are required before recommendation for approval can be made, and therefore it is resolved that the Village of Dobbs Ferry Planning Board recommends that the trustees treat the subject action as a type 1 action under SEQA, and be it further resolved that the Planning Board does not endorse the project as proposed and herein recommends that the following conditions be strictly adhered to the event that, in the event that the Board of Trustees determines that the site plan conditions have been mitigated to the fullest extent practicable and grants an approval for the subject application. 1, as recommended by the Planning Board at their meeting of September 10, the top story of the middle building should be eliminated with the resulting loss of one proposed dwelling unit. The final design treatment of the proposed building should fully incorporate comment from the Architectural and Historic Review Board. 2, any variances required for compliance with village zoning should be described and noted on the plans. Resolution date for various variances granted should also be referenced. The New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation should be contacted for review and comment. The applicant states that a copy of April 8, 2015 submission was forwarded. Due to the project's location abutting the Old Croton Aqueduct, this application is type 1 under CEQA, and protection of the aqueduct retaining wall should be noted on the plan. The applicant indicated that a maintenance agreement will be offered to New York State to permit access to the subject property for the purpose of repairs and maintenance. This remains to be completed and must occur if any approval is forthcoming. 5, as the project calls for site development results in 100% impervious surface, The required landscape plan will show that no green areas on the site can be provided. To mitigate this condition, the applicant should be required to explore with New York State Parks Office potential enhancement and maintenance of vegetation on the old Croton Aqueduct where it abuts the property. The applicant shall comply with conditions enumerated in October 8, 2015 Han Engineering Staff Report to the satisfaction of the village engineer. All applicable provisions, site plan regulations should be met prior to the issuance of building permit. All required site plan and engineering fees shall be paid prior to the issuance of building permit. A site construction bond shall be drawn to the satisfaction of the building inspector. Such bond shall convert to a one-year maintenance bond at the close of construction. The following language should be added. Quote, approved subject to all requirements and conditions of a resolution dated October 8 of the Planning Board of the Village Dobbs Ferry. Any change, erasure, so on, absent reapproval shall void this. Be it resolved that this resolution shall have an effective date of October 8, 2015. And I will make this motion. Is there a second?
Just a question,
Yes.
this last item, approved subject to requirements, we approve that it's disapproved, not recommended, is that what
Yeah.
that means?
Yes.
Okay.
We also added a condition related that the parking spaces to be built on the site should be dedicated to the apartments.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
put that language.
So,
And we also need to close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing.
all right, I move we close the public hearing. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye, aye. Okay. So I make that motion. Is there a second?
So just to be clear, the motion on the table is to not recommend.
Yes.
Really based on the top story, right?
Yes. Yes.
I like that Darius added the word not endorse, instead of, as a way to around, we had originally drafted that maybe you could approve it subject to taking the floor off, but does not endorse the application as it presently exists. But if they wanted to go ahead and approve it, then it should have this condition of removing that floor. I think that does the same job.
Yeah, it sounds the same to me.
Sure.
Well, I'll make the motion then, again, subject to the language that we just heard.
That's all in there, I mean, added in
Yeah.
the issue about the parking. I mean, ultimately, you have to decide as a motion that you do not like the project with that story, that high story, or you do. So the motion is now that you don't, to the Board of Trustees.
Right.
You can pass that motion, or you can consider another motion.
Right. Well, this is the motion on the table, which I've made. Is there a second to this motion?
Yeah, I'll say, he's got it.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
You're abstaining. Okay.
What's next?
We move on. I think next I'd like to go to item 8, referral from the Board of Trustees for site plan review for proposed mixed use on property at 81 Main Street.
We just did that.
No, I'm sorry, not 81 Main Street, 255 Broadway. We'll keep doing 81 again until we get it right.
We're going to make another motion.
We like it.
Approve it.
Let- I don't know. Sorry.
That's it.
This is listed, for the audience, this is listed at 255 Broadway. I mean, I suspect many of you know that this is a house that's located on Broadway next to what I used to call Roseland Gardens. I don't know what it's called now. There's a single-family house next to it, and there's the former gas station, which is now a repair shop, 2 doors down on the corner. What was that called? Was that Roseland Gardens?
Yes.
Isn't that what that was?
Roseland Gardens.
It's got some funny name now, I don't know what it is. seen this house, it's all overgrown, it's a mess.
Good evening. I'm Christina Griffin. I'm the architect for this project. We're here for a pre-submission review of some preliminary drawings. This site has a 2.5-story house on it right now, which is in a terrible state and need of complete, I think, replacement. What we're proposing is that we put a multi-family building on the site. This is just kind of a conceptual study of what we're considering to put here. The idea is that this would be a 3-story building. It would have 10 units, one small studio on the level of an underground garage that's underneath the building, and then 3 units per floor with a roof decks on top. This is our site plan, and if you see this dash line here coming around, that is the setbacks that are allowed for this area. This is the Broadway district. We're planning to put a building that will be within those setbacks, and we would like to keep the building lined up where the existing building is now and leave space in the back so that we have a green buffer next to the Croton Aqueduct. What we'd like to do is have a driveway that comes down one side and feeds into an underground a garage under the building, and then some parking behind the building, and then another exit coming out. We are planning to meet the zoning code for the number of spaces that we need. We will have to have 11 inside, and we're planning to have 2 on the street and 13 altogether. And that's what we need if you follow the formula for the type of units that we're planning to put here. The purple area is actually the building that we're planning to have above, which is approximately 40 by 93 feet. This is the existing.
Christina, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
The driveways that you show on either side, are they set back from the property line appropriately?
Well, actually, we have about 13.5 feet from the property line to the building, and we're still trying to decide how much space do we leave. We have shown you a 12-foot driveway. There would be a small space that we'd like to have a little bit of either a hedge or a fence. This plan, this is a site plan that just is showing the existing, in pink is existing the development coverage that exists, which is a driveway that comes down on the right, the house with decks attached to it. The house is pushed to the south side of the property and has a non-conforming setback. And then there's a pool area with a patio in the back. I'm just showing you this just to compare the development coverage to what we're planning to do. The dark area here is the proposed building, and this is parking that comes around, which will be some type of pervious paving. This is a section cut through the site. The front of the building is aligned with the original building. We did a study to find out what would be the average of the buildings on to each side of this property. Average height, we have a 5-story building to the north and a 3-story building to the south. And the average ridge height is this dash line here of those buildings. We did not include the gas station because we considered that like an anomaly on the street. The dash line is the existing grade. Right now you come down, there's a driveway that goes underneath the house, and we're actually going to try to do the same thing, but we're gonna have to have a larger garage so we can get the parking that we need, and then a outdoor parking area with a retaining wall. This is just photographs of the neighborhood. This is our site right here. And this is the larger building that's to the north, a 5-story building. There's a 3-story building, a house to the left, and then there's a garage at the corner. I think next time we'll come, we'll put one picture per page so we can see this better. We have views that we took from, I think these are looking up from the aqueduct, and they're not very easy to see, so we'll get them large next time. But this is the big apartment building, what's the name of that building? Rosalind Apartments or something. This is the house that we're planning to replace with a 3-story building. And then on the other side to the south is a 3-story house. I have to look into seeing how many units are there. And at the very end of this run of buildings before we hit the next street, we have a gas station. This is a close-up of the house. And we have some views looking from the aqueduct, and down at the aqueduct the hill drops and there's a lot of just green space. Our floor plans are showing 3 units per floor. We like to have an entry in the front, and then the units are designed so that they take advantage of the views in the back. We have 2-bedroom, a 1-bedroom with decks in the back, and then a 1-bedroom with a deck in the front. Every floor is similar. And then the roof decks at the very top. We are looking at elevations that, even though they have a modern look, we're looking at a window that is sort of is respectful to the 3-foot by 5'6" window you see in a lot of the older homes. This is showing a 3-story facade. This is the entry to one side. What you see at the top are the railings that we're going to pull back from the edge of the building, and trellises. This is the north side of the building. And this is showing the driveway coming down and then an entrance into the parking garage underneath. We're showing some decks in the front, just on the 2nd and 3rd floor, not on the 1st floor, because we would like to preserve the green space that's in front. And then in the back, we have decks on each level. We're trying to show different materials to break up the building. And this is the facade in the back. It's practically 40 feet wide, and there's this is the wall of the garage, and we want to treat it so like a exterior of a building, like a foundation, maybe with a nice stone veneer, so that when you're looking up from the aqueduct, you would see that, and we would put a nice evergreen, of course, screen in front of that as well. And today I'm just showing you our initial ideas. These are our preliminary drawings. We are going to be working on trying to meet the zoning code as much as we can. I know there's a lot of questions about what is the height for this district. Had a lot of conversations with Ed Manley and Brian Cook, and because it's not that clear in the zoning, so we might still have to go to the zoning board, but we want to be respectful and make sure that this still feels like it is somehow fits in with the buildings on the street. So just like to know if you have any questions.
Did you have
any feedback?
Could you go back to the site plan you had of the
Yes.
adjacent buildings? Rosalind Guard, what I'm trying to do is comparatively how far back the neighbors are from the street.
We have
It's very small, right?
this key plan, which we're going to show you the next meeting, a larger neighborhood plan. The tall building next door is set back quite a bit. There's a big parking area there, and there's actually very tall evergreen trees here. So you can't even see the parking area from Broadway. This house, currently the house, and I'm pointing to right there, that house I think is in similar location to the house south of it. And terms of the setback from the street. And we wanted to keep that because we were trying to give as much open space and green space between the aqueduct and the building.
But basically the entire flank of the building would be very visible, right, as you're driving down Broadway?
Yes.
You'd see 2/3 of it at least.
Christina, do you know how many units are in the adjacent apartment building, Rosslyn Gardens?
Not.
A lot.
Was it like 40 or 50 or?
63.
63?
We're proposing 10.
Yeah.
Also in the rear part of Rosslyn Gardens, their parking garage really just abuts the aqueduct.
Yes.
It's directly on the aqueduct wall, I believe.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, it's right along the.
So when are you gonna determine the height, whether there's gonna need to be a variance? Is that the only variance you think you need, or do you think you need others? Potentially.
I don't know if we will need a variance, but I know when we talked to, Ed Manley thought maybe we would go, especially at least for a clarification. There is something in the code that says you can take the average of the houses and to each side, the buildings 200 feet on each side. This is actually the average ridge height. If we did the average eve height, we actually cut the corner of the building a little. And if that's what we have to work with, we may need a variance. On the pervious paving, we are still looking at how we can cut down on, we're at 71% and we're supposed to be at 60% max. We might be able to do that just by getting pervious paving. And I also just today found another way to cut back on the paving. I would love to have driveways less than 12 feet too. It seems like a lot of planning boards think that's a minimum, but no, I can show you many examples of driveways that are narrower than that. And,
Well, I think this will be a big scenic improvement from
Yes.
driving down Broadway for
Right.
sure. I don't know if the board has other questions at this point. I think it would be appropriate to move to call for a public hearing at our next meeting. And I would do that.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to see more site plan and the adjacent buildings. Obviously, you'll have more information at that time.
Yes.
In the meantime, work it out with the building department of whether you need a variance to go to the zoning board.
Yes. We'll find out.
So
The public's gonna be really interested in use in the aqueduct too, so.
Yes, I know. We're gonna do a complete view study analysis.
Yeah, so, but to move us on, I move that we call for a public hearing at our next meeting. Is there a second? Second, all in favor? Thank you. Thank you, this is good. There are two other things that, on our agenda that I don't think we're gonna deal with tonight. One is a continuation, where is it?
Prospective
Zoning changes?
Well, one was the item 4, which was continuation review of proposed resolution on the chart, the flow chart, which we're gonna revise and we'll be back again. And the other is continuation of review on prospective zoning changes. I think, Counselor, I think it would be helpful if we maybe call for a public hearing and get this out into the public and then be able to talk about it next time.
The final what you're gonna recommend?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just the zoning code changes?
Zoning code
Yeah,
changes,
sure.
yeah.
Okay, just for the public, it's been discussed for the last year at the planning board. There has been public comment, but there's a final proposal that you're ready to go and give to the board of trustees, who will hold a public hearing to change the code if they so desire. But you wanna set a public hearing for the next meeting?
I'd like to set a public hearing. I'd like to ask that we get a copy of this up on the village website so people have a chance to see it.
Sure, we'll notice it in the enterprise too.
And so on. Yeah.
Can we do that conditional on whether we've had a public hearing in the first place? this has gone on so long, I cannot remember. But it's the type of thing we had so much comment, it makes me think that it's likely we did have a public hearing. I mean, we had a huge crowd here.
Well, we've had,
We did, but it's been
We've had a lot
been reshaped, so I don't know.
It's not much different.
I mean, do you wanna just put your proposal out there and then consider it the next meeting, or it's up to you? I mean,
It should
technically,
be.
you don't need a public hearing, because ultimately the Board of Trustees will hold a public hearing.
Okay, well, I just.
But you did take comment.
I mean, my objective is to move it forward.
Sure.
And however is the best appropriate legal way to do that is fine, but before our meeting, I would like to get it out so that people see what it is we're talking about, because it's.
Yeah, we'll schedule a public hearing, you can't hurt by doing it.
Yeah, okay, all right. So I move we have a public hearing. Is there a second? Second, all in favor? Aye. So,
Anything else?
no, I hope not.
Oh, you wanted to change the date?
Oh, yeah. For our next meeting, now I've lost track of, I don't have my
The
calendar.
fourth, November 4th, I think.
We're gonna go from the
Wednesday.
5th to the 4th, as I recall, from Thursday to Wednesday. If I have my dates right.
There's nothing else going on the 4th that's on the calendar right now.
No, there's nothing the first Wednesday of the month,
No.
so.
Sounds like for everybody.
Irvington zoning, Irvington planning board.
That is true. But they're fast. Actually, you can go there and come here afterwards.
Yeah, it's November 4th. November 4th, Wednesday.
But it's true. Are we in agreement? I don't think we need, if we need a motion, I make the motion, but otherwise,
It should take a motion, I think, to move it.
all right, I move that we have the meeting on Wednesday, November 4th.
Here's a second.
Second, all in favor? Thank you very much, and good night.
Good night.
You need a gavel.
I have a gavel, but it has Plotkin's name on it.